God desires that his people live with wisdom. So we're going to be in Proverbs chapter 4, verses 5 through 9. Proverbs chapter 4, verses 5 through 9. When I was in college, one of the Christmas gifts I received was a poster that said, everything that I needed for life I learned from Star Wars. And in fact, my mom had that framed. And like some of the words of wisdom that it offered was that, in the words of Yoda, do or do not. There is no try, right? Another one was that faith in your friends is a strength and not a weakness. My mom had a similar poster hanging up. It used to be my room, but after I moved out, it became my dad's office. And there was a poster in there that said, everything that I needed for life I learned in kindergarten. And I think, I'm guessing, because I came across this illustration this week, and I'm guessing that this was the inspiration behind all of that. I can't prove it, so don't quote me on that, but I'm thinking that this must have been the inspiration. A guy by the name of Robert Fulham wrote in the Kansas City Times, this is what he wrote: most of what I really needed to know about how to live and what to do and how to be, I learned in kindergarten. Wisdom was not at the top of the graduate school mountain, but there in the sandbox at nursery school. These are the things that I learned. Share everything, play fair, don't hit people, put things back where you found them, clean up your own mess, don't take things that aren't yours, say you're sorry when you hurt somebody. When you go out into the world, watch for traffic, hold hands, and stick together. And what this reminds us of is that wisdom isn't about knowledge. It's not about knowing the ins and outs of the world. It's not about intelligence. It's not being able to answer everyone's question. That's intelligence. That's about education. No, and so you can be smart, you can have great intelligence, you can be really educated, and yet still miss out on wisdom. Even young children can live with wisdom, because wisdom is usually about how we treat other people and how we respond to life. Wisdom is usually about how we treat other people and how we respond to life. And God desires his people to live with wisdom. And our definition for wisdom, and we used this way back when we went through the book of James in the summer of 2022, that wisdom is godly knowledge for living well in God's world. Wisdom is godly knowledge for living well in God's world. See, we need wisdom because we can't remember enough rules and regulations and laws to keep us straight. I mean, it's hard enough, right? It was hard enough for Israel to remember the 10 Commandments and live by those, let alone the other 613 laws that they were to live by. But, and I talked about this last week, that the purpose of the Old Testament law, or what we see as the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, was to provide not only Israel with do's and don'ts, the commandments, but also to give them guidance in how they were to live. It was something that they were to meditate on, right? That's what God tells Joshua. That's what God tells Moses, to meditate on the words of this book. And that as they meditated on the stories, right? The stories like Cain and Abel, as they meditated, they were to get wisdom. Like, how do we respond to when God doesn't accept us? How do we treat one another? And so the Old Testament law wasn't just about right and wrong. Overall, it was about helping Israel learn how to live well in God's world, how they were to represent him in this world. The law was given to be a source of wisdom to help Israel know how to live well in God's world, to represent him well. The book of Proverbs was also given to God's people as a source of wisdom. And it's important for us to remember exactly what a proverb is. Because one of the first rules of biblical interpretation is context, context, context. And part of context is understanding the genre of what the book is. And so within the Bible, you have all these different sorts of genre. You have historical narrative, you have poetry, you have prophecy, you have apocalyptic literature, where it's really about understanding symbols. And so you have all these different types of literature. And you have to understand what type of literature is to know how to interpret it, to understand it. And so Proverbs, right, is a genre. It's a genre that we have today. And a proverb is a short, well-known saying that expresses a general truth, a piece of advice, or a moral lesson in a succinct and memorable way. So Proverbs are designed for us to remember them, and as we remember them, they give us wisdom, they give us guidance. For instance, here's a proverb that we have. Many hands make light work. Many hands make light work. What does that mean? It means that when a task is shared among many people, it becomes easier and less burdensome, right? Because there are more people involved. So rather than trying to tackle a big challenge on your own, it's important to get other people involved. It helps spread out the work. It makes it less challenging. Another proverb that we have is make hay while the sun shines, right? And this reminds us that we should take advantage of favorable conditions or opportunities while they're there. Because growing up on the farm, I remember there were some summers where it was like this. Like, if you waited too long, you weren't going to get that hay bale because you were going to get caught between the rainstorms. Like, you had to, when the conditions were favorable, you needed to go out and get that hay baled. You know, we have that another proverb that's kind of similar to that, right? Strike when the iron is hot. Like if the condition is right, don't put it off. Now's the time. Take advantage of it. And so these are sources of wisdom for us. And we need those. We need those little things to remind us of what is important and how to live. So the book of Proverbs is not necessarily a book about doctrine and theology. Rather, it is a book that is to provide us wisdom. These short, memorable sayings are intended to guide God's people to live well in God's world. Therefore, they're still relevant today. So, for instance, Proverbs 13:14 says this. Proverbs 13:14 says this. The instruction of the wise is like a life-giving fountain. Those who accept it avoid the snares of death. The instructions of the wise is like life-giving fountain. So, in other words, when we live with wisdom and we share what we have learned, both in how we live and and what we share with other people, what we say to them, what we teach them, that becomes a benefit to them. And we need to remember, right, that many people in this world are trying to make it the best that they know how. There's one, and I've said this before, one of my favorite verses is 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 18, where it says that we are redeemed from the worthless ways that we have inherited from our ancestors. Or empty ways. That's another. And so many people, they've received a way of living life from their ancestors, from their parents, from the world around them, and it's empty. It doesn't lead to life. And so when we live with wisdom and when we teach wisdom, when we share wisdom, we give people an opportunity to understand, to see, to observe that there's a better way to live. That they don't have to live this way. That there's an alternative. And that's why when we live with wisdom, when we speak with wisdom, we offer other people hope for life. And so one of the reasons for wanting wisdom is that we can show people that there's a better way to live. That there is a better way to live. That's one of the purposes of wisdom. So how do we become wise, right? That's the million-dollar question here. How do we become wise? Well, Proverbs chapter 4, verses 5 through 9 read this. It says this. Get wisdom, develop good judgment. Don't forget my words or turn away from them. Don't turn your back on wisdom, for she will protect you. Love her, and she will guard you. Getting wisdom is the wisest thing you can do. And whatever else you do, develop good judgment. If you prize wisdom, she will make you great. Embrace her, and she will honor you. She will place a lovely wreath on your head, and she will present you with a beautiful crown. So here we see we have three attitudes we must have in order to live with wisdom, to gain wisdom. So what's happening here? So in Proverbs chapter 4, there's a father, and he is giving his children advice. And he is saying, listen to me so you can receive wisdom, you can live with wisdom. And what's being communicated here is that wisdom is valuable and necessary for life. And we, like children, need to receive that wisdom. We don't just inherit it. It doesn't just come to us. We need to pursue it. We need to receive it. So what's the first attitude that we need to have if we're going to receive wisdom, if we're going to live with wisdom? Well, the first attitude is we must desire wisdom. Verse 5 here says, get wisdom, develop good judgment, don't forget my words or turn away from them. Don't turn your back on wisdom, for she will protect you. Love her, and she will guard you. So we must desire wisdom. So what does it mean to desire wisdom? Well, when we desire wisdom, we understand the benefit that it has for our lives. If we don't see that wisdom is going to offer us any benefit, then we're not going to desire it. We have to understand that there is a benefit that comes to living with wisdom. We want to experience that blessing. We want to experience the blessing that wisdom has to offer. And I think the reason that oftentimes we fail to desire wisdom is because we think it's hard to get. Like even when it comes to the Bible, sometimes we think, man, I can't understand this. And so it's hard. I have to get all this education. I have to get all this schooling. But the reality is, God offers it to us through his word, through his people, and through prayer. God wants us to be people of wisdom. And I do think, and I want to stress this, I think another failure we have when it comes to obtaining wisdom is that we do it solo. We try to do it on our own. And part of American Christianity is like, oh, I have my quiet time, and I read the Bible and I pray, and the way to follow Jesus, and this goes all the way back to the Old Testament. God wants his people to be in this together, learning from one another, encouraging one another, praying for one another, discussing the scripture together. That's primarily the way that we receive wisdom. Is together, as we process these things together. So as we pursue wisdom, we need to be doing this together, because we're going to miss out on the insights of one another. We're going to miss out on the encouragement of each other. So God offers us his wisdom, and it comes through his word, it comes through his people, and it comes through prayer. So that's where it comes from. And so here we see the Father encouraging his Son not to give up on gaining wisdom. That it's a lifelong process. There's never going to become a time in our life when we can sit back and think, oh, I'm wise enough. Right? No, wisdom is always, we're always going to need wisdom. Part of the reason why we need wisdom, it's like our daily bread. It's that God gives us the wisdom to get through the day, but we still need the wisdom that helps us get back through tomorrow. And we will be talking about this in a few weeks when we look at the Lord's Prayer. But Jesus taught us to pray for what? Our daily bread, the bread that we need today. There is, as God's people, we need to remember that we are always dependent upon God. And that God, because he's our good Father, he's our good shepherd, he's going to provide for what we need. And so we need to continue to pursue wisdom, to desire wisdom, to be part of our life. Verse 5 here commands us to get wisdom, to get understanding, emphasizing that there's an intentional action. See, we're not going to gain wisdom by accident. It's something that we must desire. And because we desire it, we put intentional action into obtaining it. The pursuit requires effort, discipline, and making it a priority. This is why spiritual disciplines are crucial in obtaining wisdom, and why we need to spend time in the Bible, learning and meditating in order to gain the wisdom that God has for us. It's something that we need to put time and effort into. Verse 6 encourages a relationship with wisdom, personifying it as something to cherish and guard. And here, wisdom is described as, did you notice? She, her. Wisdom, Lady Wisdom, which we saw last week in chapter 3. When we live by wisdom, she's going to guard us. She's going to cherish us. And likewise, we need to cherish and guard wisdom in our lives. So there's a relationship that is built between us and wisdom. Not only do we need to desire wisdom, but we need to prioritize wisdom. Verse 7. Getting wisdom is the wisest thing you can do. And whatever else you do, develop good judgment. What is the wisest thing you can do? Gain wisdom. Pursue wisdom. Make it a priority. So what does it mean to prioritize wisdom? Well, we can desire something, but it's possible to desire something and not make it a priority. Like we can desire to eat, but we can prioritize other things above eating. It's part of what fasting is, right? So we can desire something and not make it a priority. To prioritize something is to declare that it is valuable to us, that there is value in it. And the reason we don't prioritize wisdom is sometimes we find other things more valuable. Right? That's what it comes down to, is that we find other things more valuable than wisdom. We find entertainment more valuable than wisdom. Like, hey, I'm so tired, and so I just need to relax here. We can prioritize just gaining knowledge more than wisdom. And I do this all the time because I like knowledge. And so I'm constantly, reading and listening to podcasts, and I'm gaining knowledge, and sometimes I make that the priority over wisdom. And so if we're going to live with wisdom, we need to make it our priority. And so here the Father tells the Son that the best thing he can do in life is to get wisdom. This underscores the absolute necessity of wisdom above all else. When we have wisdom, we're able to live the life God created us to live. So wisdom should be the goal and not an afterthought. And I think sometimes we've devalued wisdom. We've been satisfied with salvation, and then because we're saved, we're going to do the best that we can. But God has promised us wisdom. And we need wisdom to bear his image in this world, to be his representatives. Wisdom is crucial for living the life God has for us. And the third attitude that we need to have is we need to value wisdom. We need to value wisdom. Verses 8 and 9 says this: if you prize wisdom, she will make you great. Embrace her, and she will honor you. She will place a lovely wreath on your head, and she will present you with a beautiful crown. So what does it mean to value wisdom? To value wisdom means to understand its worth, to understand that it's worth giving your life away for. So we can see this kind of with the illustration that we see in this proverb here, is that when we value wisdom, the Father says, she will put a wreath on your head and a crown. The prize of an athlete. Recognition. So an Olympic athlete in our day, right, will give their whole life away to training in order to have the chance of winning a gold medal, or even a medal, to have that recognition of that being placed around their neck. Like, this is something valuable. It's so valuable to me that I'm going to give my life away to it, to obtaining it. And the reason we don't value wisdom is because information is so easy to get. And so we go to Google and type in, what should I do? What should I do when I have a pain in my knee, right? What should I do with this? Or we go to YouTube, like, okay, how do you how do you fix this? How do you do that? And so because information is so easy to obtain, sometimes we don't even think about the benefit of wisdom and having wisdom and the value of wisdom. There's plenty of information in the world, but true wisdom only comes from God, the one who created us. So the Father here tells the Son that one of the blessings of wisdom is that it exalts and honors those who embrace it. When we live with wisdom, we become a blessing to those around us. It's part of what we want to do as followers of Jesus, as being God's people, to be a blessing to those around us. So when we live with wisdom, we become a blessing to those who are around us, and not just for us. You know, there's a blessing for those around us, and so it's a blessing to us, but it's also a blessing to those around us. And it's a blessing to those around us through the things that we say, but mostly through what we do. Now, we all have learned lessons and remember things that people have said to us, things that are life-changing. Like on my birthday, I made a blog post on 51 truths that I've learned in 51 years, right? And the top one is, if you go for the right reasons, God will get you to the right place. I heard Erwin McManus say that way back in 2003, and it's just stuck with me. So there are lessons, there are things that people say that stick with us, that guide us, but mostly how we have been, the wisdom that we have is given to us through other people and the way that they actually lived. My Grandma and Grandpa Steele and my parents influenced me much more by how they lived out their faith than the things that they said to me. Now, there are lessons that stuck with me, but it's how they lived that was a truly benefit to me. And so living with wisdom isn't just about having the right information or the right truth that we can share with people. It's about how we live. And as we live, we become a blessing to them. And when this is the case, they're going to honor us. They're going to recognize us. They're going to say thank you to us. God desires that his people live with wisdom. And this wisdom is seen in how we treat other people and how we respond to the circumstances of life. That's what we need wisdom for more than anything. Is how do we treat other people, and how do we respond to this circumstance that I have in my life? And because those things happen so fast, we don't have enough time to say, hey, just a minute, let me pull out my Bible here and find We need to have wisdom in our hearts so that it becomes second nature when we experience things in our lives, that we respond properly. This is why character development and virtue are so important for God's people. That's why the New Testament is all about this is how you are to live. These are the things that you are to avoid. These are the things that you are to embrace. These are the things that you are to do. Because as we become and we meditate on these and we live them, they become second nature to us. And we don't have to think about, am I honoring Jesus with how I live? It's just what we do. Wisdom is crucial in that. So how do we receive wisdom? How are we wise in this world? First of all, we have to desire wisdom, to understand that wisdom is useful for living. We also have to prioritize wisdom, to put intentional action into obtaining wisdom, and we have to value wisdom, to understand that wisdom is a great reward to those who pursue it. And as we live with wisdom, we become a blessing to those around us. So, here is our big idea this morning. Living with wisdom leads to a life that glorifies God and blesses others. Living with wisdom leads to a life that blesses others, or that glorifies God and blesses others. That's what we want to do. We want to be a blessing in this world, and we want to glorify God. We want to show the world that there is a better way to live. This is what, when Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth and the light of the world, this is what he means. That we glorify God and we bless others. That is our goal, and we need wisdom in order to do that. And here's our challenge. Our challenge is to read through the book of Proverbs and take time to memorize a few. That's part of why Proverbs is in our Bible. And so that we would memorize it, we would memorize them, and when the time comes, we're like, oh, this is what we're to do. This is how we're to respond. This is how we're to live. Wisdom is not just about knowledge. It's about living well in God's world. Wisdom isn't just about knowledge. It's about living well in God's world. So make the choice to be wise today.